when my son Kevin screamed, "You will either clean up this mess for my wife or get out of my house." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't list all the sacrifices I had made for him, for them, for the roof over their heads that was, in fact, mine. Instead, a strange sense of calm washed over me. I looked at the chaos of his wife's cheap jewelry business spread across my living room, the room my late husband Robert and I had spent 30 years making into a home. I smiled, a small, quiet smile he didn't understand, picked up my handbag from the one clear corner of the coffee table, and walked out the front door. He expected tears. He expected me to fold, to apologize, to start cleaning up Brenda's mess like I always did. But this time was different. A week later, my phone had logged over 30 missed calls and a flood of increasingly frantic text messages. That was only the first small tremor of the earthquake I was about to trigger in their comfortable, entitled lives. They would soon understand the true cost of their disrespect. Before I get into all the details, I want to take a moment to thank you for being here and listening to Grandma's Daily Story. If you enjoy hearing stories like this, please take a moment to subscribe and click the notification bell so you don't miss a thing. We post a new story every single day. And tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from. It brings me so much joy to see how far our stories travel. Now, let me tell you exactly how it all fell apart. The scent of old paper and binding glue still clung to my cardigan when I walked through the front door. It was a smell I loved, a comforting perfume from the 3 afternoons a week I volunteered at the Oak Creek Public Library. It was my little escape, a place of quiet order that felt a million miles away from the slow-motion disaster my own home had become. The Tuesday afternoon light was filtering through the big bay window in the living room, the one Robert had installed himself one summer, the one that used to fill the room with golden warmth. Today, it just illuminated the mess. My living room, my sanctuary of peace, looked like a dollar store had exploded. Half-open cardboard boxes from China were stacked precariously high, spilling plastic baggies filled with cheap metal charms and imitation gemstones. Spools of colored wire, beads, and pliers were scattered across the Persian rug Robert's mother had gifted us for our wedding. The air, usually smelling of the lemon polish I used on the antique furniture, was thick with the chemical stench of industrial glue and cheap plastic. Brenda, my daughter-in-law, was perched on my velvet armchair, the one I'd reupholstered myself, with her feet propped up on a tower of shipping boxes. She was scrolling through her phone, a thumb flicking endlessly, a blank expression on her face. She didn't look up. "Hey," she said, her voice flat and bored. "There's a new shipment on the porch. Can you bring it in before you start making dinner? And you'll need to clean this up. I have to package orders tonight and I need a clear workspace." I set my handbag down on the floor, the only clear space available. My back ached from shelving books all day, a dull throb that had become my constant companion. "Brenda," I started, trying to keep my voice even. "We talked about this. Your business inventory needs to stay in the garage." She finally looked up from her phone, her eyes narrowed in annoyance. "Oh, please, Eleanor. The lighting in the garage is terrible for my product photos. It's not a big deal. You're home all day anyway." The sheer dismissiveness of it, the assumption that my time was worthless, that my home was merely her warehouse, was a familiar sting. This wasn't a new fight. It was just the latest battle in a long, draining war. "It is a big deal to me," I said, my voice a little firmer than I intended. "This is our shared living space." She scoffed, a little puff of air through her nose. "It's our home now. We let you stay here so you wouldn't be lonely after Robert died. The least you can do is be supportive of my career." That word, "let," was a slap. They let me stay in the house my husband and I had poured our life savings into, the house I had paid off 5 years ago, the house where every single utility bill, every property tax notice came addressed to me, Eleanor Gable. I was about to respond when the front door opened again and my son, Kevin, walked in. He dropped his briefcase, sighed dramatically at the sight of the mess, and then looked from my face to Brenda's. His expression immediately hardened when he saw my posture, my hands clenched at my sides. He didn't see a mother whose home had been violated. He saw a problem upsetting his wife. "What's going on now?" he asked, his tone already exhausted, already blaming me. "Your mother," Brenda said, her voice instantly transforming into that of a wounded victim. "She's attacking me for trying to run my business. I asked for a little help, and she's acting like I'm a criminal." Kevin's gaze fell on me, cold and disappointed. It was the same look he'd given me when I'd refused to co-sign a loan for his third sports car in 5 years, a look that said I was being difficult, unreasonable, selfish. Mom, for God's sake, just help her out. Brenda is trying to build something here. We need the extra income. I am not her unpaid employee, Kevin, I said, my voice trembling slightly. And this is not a warehouse. I have asked, repeatedly, for some basic respect for our home. Brenda stood up then, placing her hands on her hips. Respect? I'm the one bringing money into this house while you spend your days at that dusty old library for free. You live here rent-free, Eleanor. You don't contribute. The lie was so audacious, so breathtakingly false, that it left me speechless for a second. Every month, my Social Security and Robert's small pension disappeared into this house, into their lives. I paid the mortgage until it was gone. I paid the property taxes. I paid for the groceries, the endless stream of packages from Amazon, Brenda's car insurance, Kevin's student loans. They lived off of me, all while pretending they were the generous ones. That's when Kevin stepped forward, his face a mask of frustration. He stood next to his wife, a united front against me. That's enough, Mom. Brenda is right. You need to decide. Either you're part of this family and you help out, or you're not. You will either clean up this mess for my wife, or you will find somewhere else to live. The words hung in the air, sharp and ugly. I looked at my son, searching his face for any flicker of the boy I raised, the boy who used to bring me dandelions and tell me I was the best mom in the world. I saw nothing but a stranger, a man parroting his wife's cruelty. Fine, I said, the word coming out as a whisper. Brenda's face broke into a triumphant smirk. Good. Now, the boxes on the porch first. I'll find somewhere else to live, I finished. The smirk vanished from her face, replaced by a slack-jawed confusion. Kevin stared at me as if I'd just started speaking in a foreign language. They expected me to crumble, to plead, to do what I always did, absorb their selfishness and keep the peace. But hearing that ultimatum, in my own home, from my own son, had flipped a switch deep inside me. It wasn't just a switch of anger, but of clarity. I turned without another word and walked toward my bedroom, leaving them standing there amidst the wreckage of Brenda's ambition and their own monstrous ingratitude. I could hear their frantic whispers behind me, Brenda's sharp, questioning tones and Kevin's confused mumbling. I ignored them. My feet felt light on the hallway runner, the one Robert and I had picked out at a flea market years ago. Each step was a step away from them, a step back toward myself. The guest room, which had become my de facto bedroom after they'd taken the master suite for themselves, was the only space that still felt like mine. I pulled my old suitcase from the top of the closet. It was a sturdy, old-fashioned Samsonite, the one Robert and I had taken on our 25th anniversary trip to the Grand Canyon. It felt heavy with memories, both good and bad. I laid it open on the bed and began to pack, my movements methodical and calm. I wasn't just packing clothes. I was curating the pieces of my life I wanted to take with me. My favorite sweaters, the comfortable shoes for walking, a few pairs of slacks. I left behind the fancy dresses I never wore, the ones I'd bought for their wedding and the holiday parties where they paraded me around like a prop. From my nightstand, I took the silver-framed photo of Robert and me on our wedding day. His smile was so full of hope. I wrapped it carefully in a silk scarf and tucked it into a side pocket. Next came the small worn leather box where I kept my most precious things. My mother's locket, a seashell from our last trip to the ocean, Robert's purple heart from his time in the service. These were the things that defined me, not the woman they saw as a live-in maid and ATM. The arguing in the living room grew louder. Brenda's voice was high and shrill. What is she doing? Is she serious? You have to stop her, Kevin. Kevin's voice was a low rumble of confusion and panic. I don't know. I didn't think she'd actually do it. What are we going to do about the bills? His words, meant to be a private whisper, carried down the hall and struck me with the force of a physical blow. Their first thought wasn't about me, my feelings, or where I would go. It was about the money. Of course it was. My hands didn't falter. I packed my medication, my reading glasses, and my journal, the one where I'd chronicled years of their casual cruelties, my own dwindling sense of self-worth. It was a painful record, but it was also evidence. When the suitcase was full, I zipped it shut and rolled it to the door. I took one last look around the room, at the life I was leaving behind. There was no sadness, only a profound sense of relief, as if I'd been holding my breath for years and could finally exhale. When I rolled the suitcase into the living room, they fell silent. They were standing exactly where I'd left them, like statues in a museum of dysfunction. Brenda's face was a mixture of anger and fear. Kevin just looked lost, like a child who had broken his favorite toy and didn't know how to fix it. He took a step toward me. "Mom, wait. Let's talk about this." "There's nothing left to talk about," I said, my voice steady. "You gave me a choice. I made it." I walked past them, past the mess of beads and boxes, and opened the front door. I didn't look back. The evening air was cool on my face, a refreshing balm. My old Buick, a car I'd kept in perfect condition for 15 years, started with a familiar, reliable rumble. As I backed out of the driveway of the house I owned, I didn't glance at the front window to see if they were watching. I already knew what I would see. Two selfish people finally realizing that their cash machine had just walked out the door. The drive across town was short, but it felt like a journey across a lifetime. Every street corner, every landmark, triggered a memory of sacrifice. I passed the community pool where I'd spent countless summer afternoons watching Kevin practice for the swim team, the fees for which had cost a small fortune. I drove by Oak Creek High School, and a flood of memories washed over me. The absurdly expensive graduation party he'd insisted on, costing me nearly $1,000 I couldn't afford, all to impress friends who disappeared from his life a month later. Then there was college. Not the perfectly good state school nearby, but a private liberal arts college 2 states away, because as Kevin had argued, he needed the full campus experience. That experience had cost me over $20,000 in loans I had to co-sign, loans I was still making payments on because he'd declared them too much of a burden after graduation. My mind churned with the numbers, a grim accounting of my own foolish generosity. His first car, a sporty coupe he'd wrapped around a telephone pole 3 months after I helped him buy it. I'd paid the insurance deductible and helped him get another one. His wedding to Brenda was the financial tipping point. Her family had vaguely waved their hands and spoken of financial difficulties, leaving me to foot the bill for the entire extravagant affair. Brenda had wanted a fairy tale, and I, wanting to see my only son happy, had drained my savings to give it to her. The $10,000 venue, the $5,000 caterer, the Vera Wang knockoff dress she just had to have. I paid for it all, quietly, telling myself this was what a good mother did. Then came the ultimate request, 2 years ago. Kevin had been laid off from his marketing job. Brenda's business was just a hobby that cost more than it made. They were about to be evicted from their apartment. "Just for a few months, Mom," Kevin had pleaded. "Just until we get back on our feet." 2 years. For 2 years, they had lived in my home. They started in the guest room, but soon complained it was too small. They'd moved into my master bedroom, claiming they needed the larger closet and the attached bath. I had moved my own things into the smaller room without a fight. For 2 years, I had become a ghost in my own home, my life shrinking to make space for their ever-expanding needs. I paid for everything, not just the big things, but the hundreds of small daily expenses that bled my accounts dry. The premium cable channels they watched, the high-speed internet they needed, the weekly grocery bills that were triple what I would spend for myself, filled with organic produce for Brenda's special diet and expensive cuts of meat for Kevin. My retirement, the future Robert and I had planned, was being eaten alive by their lifestyle. And I had let it happen, convincing myself it was love. But it wasn't love. It was exploitation. I pulled into the parking lot of the Oak Creek Suites, a clean but unremarkable extended-stay hotel on the edge of town. The room they gave me was on the 3rd floor, overlooking a highway. It was small, sterile, and utterly impersonal. A double bed with a polyester comforter, a small desk, a kitchenette with a microwave I'd probably never use. I set my suitcase on the luggage rack and sat down heavily on the edge of the bed. The silence in the room was absolute. It wasn't the warm, comfortable silence of a home filled with memories. It was the cold, empty silence of a place with no history. For the first time since walking out the door, a wave of grief washed over me. Not for the life I had left, but for the life I had lost. the years I had wasted enabling my son's weakness and his wife's greed. I took a deep breath, pushing the feeling down. This was not the time for sorrow. This was the time for action. I pulled my tablet from my handbag, the one Kevin had mockingly called my old lady device, and connected to the hotel's spotty Wi-Fi. I logged into my bank account, the numbers glowing on the screen in the dimming light. Checking, savings, what was left of my retirement fund. It was a digital representation of a lifetime of hard work, of skipped vacations and patched-up clothes, of careful planning and endless sacrifice. The cursor blinked on the screen, a tiny rhythmic pulse waiting for my command. For years, the flow of money had only gone one way, out. Out to Kevin, out to Brenda, out to their endless list of wants disguised as needs. Tonight, I was going to build a dam. I spent the next hour creating a spreadsheet, a meticulous ledger of my own financial ruin. Every automatic payment, every bill I covered, every subscription. The car insurance for their 2 late-model SUVs, their top-tier cell phone plans, the 5 different streaming services, Kevin's student loan payment, which was automatically debited from my checking account on the 1st of every month, the 2 credit cards on which they were both authorized users, cards they used for daily coffees, expensive dinners, and clothes I never saw. The list grew longer and longer, a sickening catalog of my own naivete. When I was done, I leaned back and looked at the total. The amount of money I was spending on them each month was staggering. It was more than my entire Social Security check. I had been slowly bankrupting myself to fund their comfortable illusion of a successful life. The clarity was painful, but it was also liberating. The plan began to form in my mind, a clear sequence of steps. Tomorrow was Wednesday. Banks would be open. Customer service lines would be staffed. Tomorrow, the flow of money would stop. I closed the tablet, stood up, and walked to the window. The endless stream of headlights on the highway below looked like a river of light, everyone going somewhere, everyone with their own lives, their own problems. For the first time in a very long time, I felt like I was finally rejoining that stream, finally steering my own course. The quiet of the hotel room no longer felt empty, it felt like potential. It was the quiet of a blank page, and tomorrow I would begin writing a new chapter. Wednesday morning dawned gray and drizzly, the sky the color of wet pavement. It suited my mood perfectly, somber, determined, and focused. I made a cup of the terrible instant coffee provided by the hotel and spread my financial documents across the small desk. Bank statements, credit card bills, insurance policies. It was my arsenal, and I was a general preparing for a long overdue campaign. I had my spreadsheet open on my tablet, a line-by-line list of every financial cord that tied me to them. It was time to start cutting. The first call was to Oak Creek National Bank, my bank for over 40 years. After navigating the automated menu, a cheerful young woman named Sarah answered. "Good morning, Mrs. Gable," she said after I provided my account details. "How can I help you today?" My voice was clear and steady when I replied. "Good morning, Sarah. I need to cancel several automatic payments linked to my primary checking account." I gave her the first one. The monthly payment to Westlake Financial for a student loan in the name of Kevin Gable. I could hear the clicking of her keyboard. "Okay, I see that one. It's been active for over 3 years. Are you sure you wish to cancel it?" "Completely sure," I said. "The beneficiary of that loan is now responsible for his own debts." "All right," she said, a hint of professional curiosity in her tone. "It's canceled, effective immediately. Any others?" "Yes," I said, looking at my list. The monthly payment for car insurance to Allstate, policy number 74B92, and the monthly payment for the family cell phone plan to Verizon Wireless. Each cancellation felt like a small victory, a brick being removed from a heavy wall that had been built around me. Sarah processed them all efficiently, providing a confirmation number for each one. The final item for the bank was the most important. "Sarah, I also need to make a change to my account itself. I need to request a new debit card and PIN immediately, and have the old one deactivated. I believe it may have been compromised." This was a necessary step. Brenda was notorious for borrowing my wallet to run to the store, and I had no doubt she had my PIN memorized. "Of course, Mrs. Gable. We can do that right away. The new card will be mailed to your home address." "No," I interrupted gently. "Please send it here to my temporary address at the Oak Creek Suites." I'll be staying here for the foreseeable future. There was a short pause on the other end of the line. I knew what she was likely thinking. An elderly woman changing her address to a hotel, canceling payments for her son. It painted a picture, and not a happy one. I understand, she finally said, her voice softer now. Your new card will be sent via courier and should arrive by tomorrow afternoon. The second call was to Verizon. This one was more complicated. Kevin was the primary account holder on paper, a decision made years ago that had seemed logical at the time, but the payment had always come from my bank account. I explained the situation to a patient representative named Marcus. Ma'am, since your son is the account holder, you can't technically remove his line. But you can stop the automatic payments from your bank, and you can remove your own line from the plan. That's not what I want to do, I explained calmly. I am the one paying for all 4 lines on this plan. My line, my son's line, my daughter-in-law's line, and a 4th line for a tablet they use. I want to separate my line onto a new individual plan and remove my payment information from his account entirely. They will be responsible for their own service from this moment forward. It took nearly 45 minutes of being on hold, speaking to a supervisor, and verifying years of payment history from my bank account. But finally, it was done. Okay, Mrs. Gable, the supervisor said, sounding weary. Your new individual plan is set up. The other 3 lines are now the full responsibility of the account holder, Mr. Kevin Gable. The current bill is past due, and if payment is not received within 48 hours, service to those lines will be suspended. I smiled. Thank you. That's perfect. The credit cards were the main event. I had 2. A Visa with a high limit that I'd had for decades, and a department store card for Kohl's. Kevin and Brenda were authorized users on both. I started with the Visa. I explained to the fraud department that I wanted to remove 2 authorized users and report their cards as lost or stolen to prevent any further use. And I want to dispute several recent charges, I added, pulling up the online statement on my tablet. I went through the list. A $350 charge at a high-end salon called Chic Boutique. A $500 charge at an online clothing store I'd never heard of. A series of expensive restaurant charges, all in the last month. My son and daughter-in-law were authorized users, I explained, but these purchases were not authorized by me. The agent was very helpful. He immediately froze the cards associated with their names and started the dispute process for the charges. You will receive temporary credit for these amounts while we investigate, Mrs. Gable. The investigation can take up to 60 days. The Kohl's card was even more interesting. When I spoke to their customer service, the representative noted something odd. Ma'am, I see that your authorized user, Brenda Gable, has made a number of large purchases in the last few months, but I also see a pattern of returns. She buys a lot of merchandise and then returns it, but she always requests the refund in the form of a store credit gift card, not a refund to the original credit card. My blood ran cold. I knew exactly what that meant. She was buying things on my credit, then returning them for store credit that she could use herself, untraceably, or likely even sell for cash. It was a clever, deceitful little scheme. I see, I said, my voice dangerously quiet. Please remove both authorized users from my account immediately. And can you please email me a detailed record of all transactions, including those returns, for the last 6 months? Yes, ma'am, I can do that. The documents are on their way to your email right now. By lunchtime, my work was done. Every financial lifeline had been severed. Every automatic tap on my resources had been sealed off. I sat back in the cheap hotel chair, a stack of notes beside me covered in reference numbers, confirmation codes, and the names of the customer service agents I had spoken to. It was a paper trail of my own liberation. My phone had remained silent all morning. Not a single call or text from Kevin or Brenda. They were still living in their bubble, oblivious. They probably wouldn't notice anything was wrong until Brenda's phone was shut off mid-scroll through Instagram, or until Kevin's card was declined when he tried to buy his overpriced lunch. But the first real shockwave would hit on Friday. That was the day the direct deposit I'd set up to transfer money into their checking account for incidentals, a fund that cost me $500 a week, was scheduled to hit. On Friday, that deposit would not arrive. I closed my tablet and walked to the window. The drizzle had stopped, and a weak afternoon sun was trying to break through the clouds. I felt a sense of profound peace. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, it was my own. I wasn't just supporting myself anymore. I was finally, truly, taking care of myself. The rest of Wednesday and all of Thursday passed in a strange, suspended quiet. It was the calm before the storm, and I used the time to solidify my new life. I found a small local grocery store and bought food I actually enjoyed: fresh fruit, yogurt, a good loaf of sourdough bread. I ate a simple dinner at the small desk in my room and read a book until I fell asleep. No television blaring in the background, no passive-aggressive sighs from Brenda about the meal I'd cooked. It was blissful. The missed calls started on Friday morning, just as I had predicted. The first one came in at 9:15 a.m. Kevin. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a text message appeared on my screen. "Mom, did you forget to do the transfer? My car payment is due." I looked at the message and felt nothing but a cool detachment. I deleted it. An hour later, another call from Kevin, then one from Brenda, then another text from Kevin, more urgent this time. "Mom, this isn't funny. Brenda tried to use the Kohl's card and it was declined. Call me." By noon, my phone's screen was a log of their rising panic. 9 missed calls in total. I listened to one of Kevin's voicemails out of curiosity. His voice was tight with frustration. "Mom, I don't know what game you're playing, but it needs to stop. The bank just told me the automatic payment for my student loan was canceled. You need to fix this. Now." There was no concern in his voice. No, "Are you okay?" No, "Where are you?" Just demands. Just the angry buzzing of a spoiled child whose favorite toy had been taken away. That afternoon, I took a long walk in a nearby park. The air was crisp, and the autumn leaves crunched under my feet. I watched families playing, couples walking their dogs, people living their lives. I felt a part of the world again, not just an observer from the sidelines of my own home. For 2 years, my life had revolved around their needs, their dramas, their schedules. Now, my only schedule was my own. The quiet was broken when my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. "Eleanor, you have created a huge problem for us. You are being incredibly selfish and childish. Whatever point you think you are making, you have made it. Now it is time to turn our phones back on and put the money back. Brenda." She must have found a friend's phone to use. The arrogance of the message, the complete lack of self-awareness was almost comical. I typed back a single sentence. "My name is Mrs. Gable to you." I then blocked the number. By Saturday morning, the number of missed calls had climbed to 24. The texts had become a stream of consciousness of their meltdown. Kevin's messages had morphed from angry demands to confused pleading. "Mom, please just tell me what's going on. Did we do something wrong? Let's talk." Brenda's, sent from more borrowed phones, were pure venom. "You will regret this, you old hag. You have no idea what you've done." I documented every single message, taking screenshots and saving them to a secure folder on my tablet. I didn't know if I would need them, but my instincts told me to build a record. The confrontation I knew was coming happened on Saturday afternoon. There was a sharp, insistent knock on my hotel room door. I looked through the peephole and saw them standing there, side by side. Kevin looked pale and stressed, his hair a mess. Brenda was practically vibrating with fury, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. They looked like 2 bedraggled children who had been caught in a storm of their own making. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and opened the door. I did not step back to let them in. I stood my ground, my body blocking the entrance. "Mom," Kevin began, his voice cracking. "Thank God. We've been so worried. Why haven't you been answering your phone?" The lie was so transparent it was almost insulting. "You weren't worried about me, Kevin. You were worried about your bank account." "That's not true," he said a little too quickly. Brenda pushed forward, shoving past him. Her face was red and blotchy. "Stop playing the victim, Eleanor. You abandoned us. You turned off our phones, canceled our credit cards. You're trying to ruin our lives over a stupid argument about some boxes." "This was never about boxes, Brenda," I said, my voice as cold and calm as a frozen lake. "This was about years of disrespect. This was about you treating my home like your personal flophouse and me like your servant. This was about you, both of you, draining my life savings while convincing yourselves you were doing me a favor by living with me. We were keeping you company, Kevin insisted. You would have been all alone in that big house. I would have been at peace, I retorted. I would have had financial security. I would have had my dignity. You didn't give me company, Kevin. You took my home, my money, and my self-respect. The rent, Mom, he said, his voice dropping to a desperate whisper. The landlord for the house. The property tax bill came. It's due at the end of the month. How are we supposed to pay it? I almost laughed. Kevin, I am the landlord. I own that house. There is no rent. And yes, the property tax bill is due. I have already arranged to pay it as I do every year. The real question is, how are you going to pay for the new place you'll have to find? Because you will be leaving my house. Brenda gasped. You can't do that. We have rights. Do you? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Do you have a lease? Have you ever paid a single dollar in rent or utilities? No. You were guests in my home. And your visit is now over. I will be contacting a lawyer on Monday to begin the formal eviction process. You have 30 days to vacate my property. Kevin looked like he was going to be sick. He leaned against the doorframe for support. Mom, please. We can't afford to move. We have nowhere to go. Jessica, Brenda lost her job. What? I looked at Brenda, whose face had gone from red to a pasty white. Brenda's business is thriving, I said with mock sweetness. I've seen her posts on social media. All those happy customers. All that success. Surely she can afford a small apartment. Brenda's eyes darted back and forth, cornered. The truth was, her business was a sham, a front for her spending habits, all funded by me. It's been a slow month, she stammered. I started to close the door. My patience had run its course. You wanted to be independent adults. Now you have the opportunity. I suggest you start looking for apartments you can actually afford, and jobs that can actually pay for them. Mom, wait! Kevin's voice was broken now. He put his hand on the door, stopping me from closing it. What about family? What about everything we've been through together? I paused and looked at his desperate, tear-streaked face. For a fleeting moment, I saw the little boy who used to fall asleep in my lap while I read him stories. But that boy was gone, replaced by a man who had stood by and watched his wife demand I clean up her mess or be thrown out of my own home. Family, Kevin, I said softly, is a two-way street. I traveled my direction for 26 years, giving everything I had. When it was your turn to travel even a few steps in my direction, to show me the smallest bit of respect, you chose to stand with her. Those were your consequences. These are mine. I gently pushed his hand off the door and closed it, shutting out their shocked faces. I slid the deadbolt into place and leaned against the cool wood, the sound of my own heartbeat loud in my ears. Outside, I could hear Brenda start to scream, a string of curses and threats. Kevin was trying to quiet her, his voice pleading. I walked away from the door and sat down at the desk. The next phase of my plan was about to begin. They thought this was just about money. They had no idea how much deeper the rot went. And I was about to expose all of it. The click of the deadbolt sliding into place was one of the most satisfying sounds I had ever heard. It was a sound of finality, a metallic full stop on a chapter of my life that had gone on for far too long. Outside in the hallway, Brenda's muffled shrieking was punctuated by Kevin's weak, pleading tones. I ignored them. Their noise, their chaos, was on the other side of the door now. It could no longer touch me. I walked over to the small desk, my legs feeling surprisingly steady. I sat down and looked at my tablet, the screen still glowing with the spreadsheet of my finances. This was only step one. Cutting off the money was the immediate, necessary amputation to stop the bleeding. But I knew, with a certainty that settled deep in my bones, that the infection ran much deeper. They thought this was just about money, about their allowance being cut off. They had no idea how much more there was to uncover, and I was about to become a detective in the sad, sordid crime of my own life. My first move was to delve into the Kohl's credit card statement that the customer service agent had emailed me. I opened the file, and what I found was even more methodical and sinister than I had imagined. It wasn't just a few random returns. It was a system. Every month for the past 8 months, there was a pattern. Large purchases of easily returnable items, High-end kitchen appliances, expensive bedding sets, designer handbags would be made online using my card. Then, a week or two later, the exact same items would be returned to a physical store. And every single time, the refund was issued not back to my credit card, but as a store gift card. The total amount she had siphoned off in this way was just over $4,000. $4,000 in untraceable store credit that she had been using to either fund her own lifestyle or, more likely, sell for cash. The sheer, calculated deceit of it made me feel nauseous. This wasn't a crime of desperation. It was a long-term, premeditated fraud. While I was paying for her groceries and her car insurance, she was actively stealing from me behind my back, smiling to my face the entire time. As I scrolled through my online bank statements, cross-referencing dates, a new and even more disturbing pattern began to emerge. There were small, recurring debits that I had previously overlooked. They were from companies with vague names like Cash Now Services and Express Lend Financial. They weren't large amounts, usually between $50 and $100, so they had blended in with the usual noise of daily expenses. But seeing them now, in the harsh light of my new reality, they looked sinister. I searched for the first company name online. My heart sank as the results came up. It was a payday loan company. They specialized in providing small, short-term, high-interest loans. I clicked through their website. To apply for a loan, you needed a name, address, date of birth, and a social security number. Information Brenda would have had easy access to. She had helped me with my taxes the year before, and I, like a fool, had left all my important documents on the dining room table for a week. My hands were shaking as I searched for the other company names. They were all the same, payday lenders, at least 4 of them. For months, it seemed, Brenda had been taking out small loans in my name, using my checking account for the automatic repayments. She was using my identity to borrow money, letting the high-interest payments drain directly from my account. This was no longer just financial exploitation. This was identity theft. I felt a surge of cold fury that was so intense it almost took my breath away. She hadn't just used me as a bank. She had used my very identity as a tool for her own gain, putting my name and my credit at risk without a second thought. I knew I couldn't handle this alone. The complexity of it, the sheer criminality, was beyond my understanding. I needed advice. I needed a friend. I scrolled through my phone's contacts, and my eyes landed on a name I hadn't called in months. Susan Peterson. Susan and I had gone to high school together and had stayed friends for over 50 years. She had worked as a bank teller at Oak Creek National for 30 of those years before retiring. If anyone understood financial fraud, it was Susan. I dialed her number, my heart pounding in my chest. She answered on the second ring, her voice as warm and familiar as ever. "Eleanor Gable, to what do I owe this pleasure? I was just thinking about you the other day." "Susan," I said, my voice hoarse, "I'm in some trouble. I need your help." I spent the next 30 minutes laying it all out for her. The ultimatum, my departure from the house, the canceled credit cards, the Kohl's gift card scheme, and finally, the discovery of the payday loans taken out in my name. Susan listened patiently, a skill she had perfected over decades of dealing with distressed bank customers. She didn't interrupt, only making small murmurs of encouragement. When I was finally done, the whole ugly story hanging in the air between us, she was silent for a long moment. Then she spoke, and her voice had lost all its warmth, replaced by a cold, hard anger. "That little witch," she said, her voice dripping with contempt. "Eleanor, this is much worse than you think. This is a 5-alarm fire. The gift card thing is fraud, plain and simple. But taking out loans in your name? That's a felony. That's identity theft." "I know," I whispered. "I just don't know what to do." "Okay, listen to me," she said, her old bank teller authority kicking in. "You need to do 3 things, and you need to do them immediately. First, you are going to call all 3 credit bureaus, Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion, and you are going to place a fraud alert and a credit freeze on your file. That will stop her, or anyone else, from opening any more new accounts in your name. A freeze is the strongest protection you can get. A credit freeze," I repeated, scribbling it down on the hotel notepad. "Second," Susan continued, "you are going to gather every piece of paper you have, the bank statements, the credit card bills showing the returns, everything, and you are going to walk into the Oak Creek police station. You need to file a formal police report for identity theft. Don't be shy about it. Use those words. This is not a family squabble anymore. This is a crime. My stomach twisted at the thought of involving the police. It felt like such a drastic, irreversible step. But Susan wasn't finished. And third, you need a lawyer. Not tomorrow, not next week. Today. You need someone to write a formal eviction notice to get them out of your house before they do any more damage. For all you know, she sold your furniture on Craigslist. Susan's words were a bucket of ice water, shocking me out of my state of overwhelmed fear and into a state of cold, clear-headed action. She was right. I had been treating this like a family drama, but Brenda had escalated it into a criminal enterprise. I had to start treating it the same way. You know, it's funny, Susan said, her voice softening slightly. My niece works at that fancy salon, Chic Boutique. She mentioned a few weeks ago that Brenda was in there, bragging about her booming online business and how she was going to be driving a new Lexus by Christmas. My niece said it seemed odd because everyone in town knows Kevin's been struggling since he lost that marketing job. The small-town grapevine. It was already working in my favor. Brenda's lies were built on a foundation of sand, and the tide was starting to come in. Thank you, Susan, I said, my voice filled with gratitude. Thank you so much. I know what I have to do now. You call me if you need anything, she said fiercely. And I mean anything. We've been friends too long for you to go through this alone. I hung up the phone feeling 10 pounds lighter. I had a plan. I had a path forward. The fear was still there, but now it was overshadowed by a powerful sense of resolve. Brenda had picked a fight with the wrong, quiet 68-year-old woman. I spent the next 2 hours on the phone, navigating the automated systems of the 3 credit bureaus. It was a frustrating, tedious process, but with each security question I answered, with each confirmation number I wrote down, I felt another lock click into place around my financial life. My credit was now frozen solid. No one could access it without my express permission. It was a fortress, and I was finally in control of the gates. My next stop was the police station. The Oak Creek Police Department was a modern brick building downtown that I had only ever driven past. Walking through the front doors felt surreal. The air smelled of stale coffee and disinfectant. A young, bored-looking officer sat behind a thick pane of plexiglass. I explained, my voice faltering only slightly, that I was there to report a case of identity theft. He listened with a practiced air of disinterest, handing me a stack of forms to fill out. I sat in a hard plastic chair in the waiting area and meticulously detailed Brenda's crimes. The fraudulent returns, the payday loans. I attached copies of the statements I had printed out at the hotel's business center. When I was done, I handed the thick stack of paper back to the officer. He glanced at it, and for the first time, his bored expression flickered. He read a few lines, then looked up at me, his eyes now showing a spark of professional interest. "Okay, ma'am," he said, his tone more respectful. "You're going to want to talk to Detective Miller. She handles our financial crimes unit. Let me see if she's available." Detective Miller was a woman about my son's age, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. She led me back to a small, cluttered office and listened intently as I recounted the entire story, from the day they moved in to my discovery of the loans. She looked through the documents I provided, her expression growing grimmer with each page. "Mrs. Gable," she said when I had finished, "I'm very sorry you're going through this, but you did absolutely the right thing by coming to us. What you've described here, especially the fraudulent loans, is a serious offense. Identity theft carries significant penalties." She pulled a form from her desk. "I'm going to take your official statement now. We will open an investigation immediately. We'll need to subpoena records from the loan companies and from Kohl's corporate security. We may also need to execute a search warrant at your residence to see if we can find any of the merchandise or other evidence." The thought of police searching my home, the home Robert and I had built, made my stomach clench. But it was a necessary violation to correct the much larger one that had been happening for years. I left the police station with a case number written on a small card. It felt solid and real in my hand. This was no longer just my word against hers. This was now an official police investigation. My final stop of the day was the law office of a man my friend Susan had recommended. Mr. Abernathy was an elderly, kind-faced lawyer who specialized in property law. He listened to my story with a sympathetic ear and assured me that the eviction process was straightforward. "They are not tenants, Mrs. Gable," he explained. "They are licensees, your guests. Since there is no lease and they have paid no rent, your only obligation is to provide them with a formal written 30-day notice to vacate the premises. We can have a process server deliver that notice tomorrow morning." I felt a wave of relief. The law was on my side. I signed the necessary paperwork and paid his retainer. For the first time, I felt like I had a team, a group of professionals who were fighting for me. The days that followed were a strange mix of productive action and anxious waiting. I found a small furnished apartment for rent on a month-to-month basis. It was in a quiet building for seniors, and the moment I walked in, it felt more like home than my own house had in 2 years. I spent my time moving my few belongings from the hotel, setting up my new, smaller life. Meanwhile, the first tremors of my counteroffensive were starting to reach Kevin and Brenda. The official eviction notice, delivered by a stern-looking process server, had apparently sent Brenda into a rage. I received a string of nearly incoherent texts from another borrowed phone, filled with threats and curses. I dutifully screenshotted them and forwarded them to Detective Miller, who replied with a simple, "Thank you. This is useful for establishing a pattern of harassment." But Brenda wasn't just relying on private threats. She was launching a public relations campaign. Susan called me on Tuesday morning. "Eleanor, you need to look at Facebook," she said, her voice tight with anger. "Brenda just posted something." I didn't have a Facebook account, so Susan read it to me. It was a masterpiece of manipulative fiction. Brenda had posted a blurry, flattering photo of herself, tears glistening in her eyes. The long caption spoke of a sudden and heartbreaking family crisis. She wrote that her beloved mother-in-law, Eleanor, was suffering from a sudden mental decline, possibly early-onset dementia, and had been cruelly manipulated by predatory financial advisors into cutting off her family. She claimed I had disappeared and that they were sick with worry. She ended the post by asking for everyone's prayers during this unimaginably difficult time. The lies were so brazen, so utterly detached from reality, that I was left breathless. She wasn't just trying to make me look bad. She was trying to paint me as mentally incompetent, a crazy old woman who couldn't be trusted. It was a classic tactic of abusers: discredit the victim so that no one will believe them when they speak out. The calls started coming in shortly after. First, it was Martha from my church knitting circle. "Eleanor, dear, I saw Brenda's post. Is everything all right? We're all so worried about you." I calmly and quietly told Martha the truth, that I was fine, that I had moved out by choice, and that Brenda's post was, unfortunately, a complete fabrication. There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line, followed by a quiet, "Oh my, that poor woman." The ambiguity of who she meant by poor woman was not lost on me. Next was Mr. Henderson, the head librarian. His tone was more cautious. "Eleanor, we saw the social media post from your daughter-in-law. Given the claims about your health, I'm afraid we'll have to ask you to take a temporary leave from your volunteer duties until this situation is resolved." I had been stripped of my volunteer work, the one thing that had brought me joy and purpose, based on a lie. The injustice of it was a bitter pill to swallow. But the most painful blow came on Wednesday evening. It was a call from Kevin. His number flashed on my screen, and for a moment I considered not answering. But I knew I had to see this through to the end. I picked up the phone. "Mom," he said, his voice thick with a strange, forced emotion. "Please, answer. I know you're angry, but you don't understand what's happening." I waited, saying nothing. "It's Brenda, Mom," he said, and I could hear him take a deep, shaky breath, like an actor preparing for a dramatic scene. "She's pregnant." The words hit me with a physical force. A baby, a grandchild. For a heartbeat, a familiar, instinctual wave of protective feeling washed over me. The instinct that had made me so vulnerable to their manipulations for so many years. The stress of all this, Kevin continued, his voice cracking on cue. "The eviction, the money, you disappearing. It's been too much for her. The doctor said she's at high risk of miscarrying. He says if things don't calm down, if her stress levels don't go down, she could lose the baby." It was the nuclear option. The one weapon they had left in their arsenal, emotional blackmail of the highest order. But something in his delivery felt off. It was too polished, too rehearsed. It sounded like a script Brenda had written for him. Congratulations on the pregnancy, Kevin, I said, my voice carefully neutral. When did you find out? A couple of weeks ago, he said quickly. Right before all this happened. Mom, I can't let my child die because of a fight over money. You always said family was the most important thing. Family is important, I agreed. And the health of a baby is paramount. I want to help. Of course I want to help. Tell me, which doctor is Brenda seeing for these complications? I'll call their office first thing in the morning and arrange to pay for any and all of her medical expenses directly. Whatever she needs. There was a dead silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the gears grinding in his head as he tried to process my response. It wasn't the reaction they had expected. They had expected me to dissolve into a puddle of guilt and open my checkbook. He stammered. You don't need to do that, Mom. If you just stop the eviction and turn the money back on, everything will be fine. Nonsense, I said, my voice bright and helpful. If there is a high-risk pregnancy, I want to ensure the best possible care for my grandchild. Just give me the doctor's name. Is it Dr. Miller? Or perhaps Dr. Chen at the Women's Health Clinic? I knew for a fact that those were the two best OB-GYNs in town. You can't just call her doctor. Kevin's voice was sharp now, tinged with panic. That's a violation of her privacy. You're right, I said soothingly. Privacy is very important. So here's what we'll do. You have Dr. Chen's office call me directly. Give them my number. Have them verify that Brenda is a patient and that there is a high-risk pregnancy. They won't have to give me any details, just confirm that the situation is real. Once they do that, I will write them a check for $10,000 to cover any and all potential expenses. No more questions asked. The silence that followed was long and telling. It was the silence of a liar who had been caught, who was frantically searching for another exit, another angle, another lie. I have to go, he finally mumbled, and the line went dead. I set the phone down, my hand steady. There was no high-risk pregnancy. There was probably no pregnancy at all. It was just one more desperate, disgusting lie in a web of lies so thick it was suffocating. But they had made a critical error. They had underestimated me. They still saw me as the soft, pliable woman who would do anything for her family. They hadn't realized that woman was gone. In her place was someone new, someone who had been forged in the fire of their betrayal. And she was just getting started. The dead silence on the other end of the phone was more damning than any confession. In that void, I heard the entire scaffolding of their deceitful world groan under the weight of a single, simple truth. I had called their bluff, and they had nothing. He had mumbled a hasty goodbye and hung up, but the conversation wasn't over. It had just entered a new, more dangerous phase. I knew then that their desperation would curdle into something uglier. The fake pregnancy was their last-ditch effort at manipulation, and its failure would not lead to surrender. It would lead to escalation. Brenda's social media campaign of lies was a targeted attack on my credibility. She was trying to poison the well, to ensure that when the real story came out, no one would know what to believe. I decided right then that I would not allow her to control the narrative. I would not hide in my new apartment, waiting for the next wave of her fiction to hit. The best way to fight lies is with the truth, spoken plainly and publicly. My opportunity came 2 days later. My friend Susan had called to check on me, and I had steered the conversation to a more mundane topic. You know, Susan, I'd said casually, I have such a craving for a real breakfast. One of those big omelets from the corner diner. I think I might treat myself tomorrow morning. Susan, bless her heart, understood immediately. What a coincidence, she'd exclaimed, a little too brightly. A few of the girls from the book club and I are meeting there around 9. You should join us. The corner diner was the unofficial heart of Oak Creek. It was the place you went for coffee after church, for a comforting lunch when you were feeling down, for a slice of pie with friends. More importantly, it was the central hub of the town's gossip network. If you wanted a story to spread through Oak Creek faster than a wildfire, you told it at the diner. I arrived the next morning at exactly 9 o'clock. As promised, Susan was there with 3 other women I knew well, all of them pillars of the community. They greeted me with warm hugs and concerned looks. I could see the conflict in their eyes. They wanted to believe me, but Brenda's portrayal of a confused elderly woman had planted a seed of doubt. We ordered our food, and I deliberately kept the conversation light, talking about the book club's latest selection and my new apartment. I was biding my time, waiting for the right moment. It came just as the waitress was refilling our coffee cups. The little bell over the diner's door jingled, and in walked Brenda. She wasn't alone. She was with two women I vaguely recognized as being from the younger, more impressionable end of my old church congregation. Brenda had her arm linked with one of them, and she was dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, putting on a masterful performance of a distraught, worried daughter-in-law. They sat in a booth directly across from us, close enough for us to hear every word. This was no coincidence. She had come here for an audience. "I just don't know what to do," Brenda said, her voice loud enough to carry across the room. "She's not answering her phone. The police say they can't file a missing persons report because she's technically not missing. But she's so vulnerable right now. Her mind. It's just not what it used to be." One of her companions patted her hand sympathetically. "You're doing everything you can, sweetie. You're a wonderful daughter-in-law to be so concerned. I just worry that someone is taking advantage of her," Brenda continued, her voice breaking dramatically. "She's been so paranoid lately, talking about stolen money and conspiracies. It's a classic sign of dementia. We're trying to get power of attorney to protect her assets, but she's fighting us every step of the way." That was it. That was the last straw. She wasn't just slandering me. She was actively trying to have me declared legally incompetent so she could seize control of my finances. The game was over. I calmly placed my napkin on the table, stood up, and walked over to their booth. Susan and my friends watched, their coffee cups frozen halfway to their mouths. Brenda didn't see me coming until I was standing right beside her table. When she looked up and saw me, her face went through a rapid series of emotions: shock, then fear, then a flash of pure, venomous anger. She recovered quickly, pasting a look of tearful relief on her face. "Eleanor," she cried out, reaching for my hand. "Oh, thank God you're safe. We've been so worried." I ignored her outstretched hand. I kept my voice low and even, but it cut through the diner's morning chatter like a knife. Every head in the room turned toward us. "Hello, Brenda," I said. "Funny seeing you here. I was just about to call the hospital to check on you. How is the high-risk pregnancy going? Have you had any luck getting a hold of Dr. Chen's office yet?" Brenda's face went completely white. The two women with her stared, their mouths slightly agape. The lie, so effective in a private phone call, withered and died under the public fluorescent lights of the diner. I don't know what you're talking about," she stammered. "You seem confused, dear." "Oh, I'm not confused at all," I continued, my voice gaining strength. "My memory is crystal clear. For instance, I remember the exact moment my son told me you were pregnant and at risk of a miscarriage because of the stress I was causing you. Such a terrible, desperate lie to tell. You must have been truly panicked." I turned my attention to her two companions. "I'm Eleanor Gable. I'm so sorry you've been drawn into this. You should know that this woman has not only been lying to you about my health, but she's also the subject of an active police investigation for identity theft." A collective gasp went through the diner. "That's a lie!" Brenda shrieked, her voice shrill. "She's crazy! She's making it all up!" "Am I?" I asked calmly. I reached into my handbag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a copy of the police report with the case number clearly visible at the top. I didn't show it to her. I showed it to the women sitting with her. "This is police report number 724B, filed with the Oak Creek Police Department. It details how Brenda here used my personal information to take out several fraudulent payday loans in my name. I believe Detective Miller is handling the case. Perhaps you should give her a call to verify." I wasn't done. I looked back at Brenda, whose face was now a mottled shade of red and purple. "And while we're clearing things up, we should probably talk about the Kohl's credit card. It's a clever scheme, I'll give you that. Buying over $4,000 worth of merchandise on my credit and then returning it for untraceable gift cards. That's not dementia, Brenda. That's felony fraud. I have all the receipts right here in my bag." Brenda shot up from her seat, knocking over a glass of water. "You are a horrible old witch," she screamed, her mask of victimhood completely shattered, revealing the ugly, twisted face of a cornered criminal. "You're trying to ruin my life." No, dear, I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper, though everyone in the silent diner heard it. You've done a magnificent job of that all on your own. You just thought you could do it on my dime. You were wrong. She stared at me, her chest heaving, her eyes wild with a mixture of hatred and panic. She had lost control of the situation, of the narrative, of everything. Without another word, she turned and shoved her way through the tables, nearly knocking over an elderly man, and stormed out of the diner, leaving her two former friends staring in stunned silence. The diner was quiet for a long moment, and then a low murmur started to build. People were looking at me, not with pity or suspicion, but with a newfound respect. Susan and my friends were already on their feet, coming to my side, their faces alight with pride. I had not just defended myself, I had exposed the truth. And in a small town like Oak Creek, the truth, once it was out, had a life of its own. The fallout was immediate and catastrophic for what was left of Brenda and Kevin's reputation. By that afternoon, the story of the diner confrontation was all over town. My friend Susan told me that Brenda's two companions had immediately gone to the church to speak with the pastor, retracting everything they had said and telling him the real story. The library called me, apologizing profusely and begging me to come back to my volunteer position whenever I felt ready. The narrative had been reclaimed. That evening, I sat in the quiet of my new apartment, a cup of tea in my hands. The fight was not over, but a major battle had been won. My phone rang. It was Kevin. His voice when I answered was barely a whisper. "She's gone," he said, his voice hollow. "Brenda, what do you mean she's gone?" "She came back from the diner this morning, screaming. She threw some clothes in a bag, took all the cash we had in the house, and took off in her car. She said she wasn't going to stick around to be humiliated and sent to jail. She's gone, Mom." I felt a profound lack of surprise. Of course she ran. People like Brenda never face the consequences of their actions. They just find new victims in a new town. "I'm sorry to hear that, Kevin," I said, and I meant it. I was sorry he had hitched his life to such a destructive person. "What are you going to do?" he asked, his voice sounding small and childlike. "The eviction, the police. I don't know what to do." "We need to talk, Kevin," I said, my tone firm. "Not on the phone. In person. Meet me tomorrow at the coffee shop on Main Street, 2:00, and you will come alone." The next day, I arrived at the coffee shop early, choosing a small table in the back corner. I wanted this conversation to be private, away from prying eyes. When Kevin walked in, he looked like a man who had been hollowed out. He was unshaven, his eyes were red-rimmed, and he had lost the arrogant posture he always carried. He looked, for the first time in years, like he was truly defeated. He sat down across from me and just stared at his hands on the table. He didn't speak for a long time. "I know you're angry," he finally said. "And you have every right to be. I messed up, Mom. I messed up so badly." "This goes beyond a simple mistake, Kevin," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "This was a years-long pattern of enabling, of disrespect, of choosing a woman who was actively robbing me over the mother who raised you. Do you understand the depth of that?" He nodded, tears welling in his eyes. "I think I'm starting to. When I saw all the paperwork from the lawyer, the police report, she'd been lying to me about everything, the money, the business, all of it." "She lied to you because you were easy to lie to," I said bluntly. "You wanted to believe in the fantasy she was selling, the fantasy of a successful, glamorous life that you didn't have to work for. You let her turn me into your personal piggy bank to fund that fantasy, and you stood by while she treated me with contempt." He flinched but didn't deny it. "I am offering you one final chance, Kevin," I said, leaning forward. "One chance to salvage a piece of your integrity and potentially, down the road, a piece of our relationship. But it will be on my terms, and my terms only." "Anything, Mom," he whispered. "I'll do anything." "First," I said, "you will make a full public confession and apology, not a vague Facebook post. You will stand up at the town council meeting next Tuesday. It's an open forum. You will stand up, and you will tell everyone the complete truth. You will tell them how I paid for your college, your wedding, your cars, your rent. You will tell them about the ultimatum you gave me in my own home. And you will tell them that every lie Brenda spread about my mental health was exactly that. a lie designed to cover up her own criminal behavior. His face went pale. Mom, you want me to humiliate myself in front of the entire town? I want you to tell the truth, I corrected him. There's a significant difference. The truth is your only path back to a respectable life in this town. Your reputation is already in tatters. Honesty is the only way to rebuild it. Okay, he croaked, nodding slowly. Okay, I'll do it. Second, I continued, you will cooperate fully with Detective Miller's investigation into Brenda. You will tell her everything you know about the fraudulent loans, the credit card schemes, everything. You will also sign a legally binding document drafted by my lawyer, agreeing to a repayment plan. You will pay me back every single cent that you and your wife stole and squandered. It will likely take you years. I don't care. You will do it. I will, he said without hesitation. And third, what about the house? I had been waiting for this question. The house. The ultimate prize he thought was still in play. The house is no longer a factor in your life, Kevin, I said gently. I've made other plans for it. His head snapped up, a flicker of the old entitlement in his eyes. What do you mean? It's our family home. It's supposed to be mine one day. A home is something you earn, something you cherish and respect, I said. You and Brenda did neither. You treated it like a hotel you didn't have to pay for. So, I have decided to give it to people who will appreciate it. Last week, I signed the deed over to the Oak Creek Public Library Foundation. It will be sold, and the entire proceeds will be used to establish the Robert Gable Children's Literacy Fund, a permanent endowment to buy books for the children of this town, in honor of your father. The color drained from his face. The finality of my decision, the fact that the inheritance he had taken for granted his entire life was now gone forever, finally seemed to hit him. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a verdict. Why? He whispered. Because I need to know, Kevin, I said, my voice softening for the first time. I need to know that if we are ever to have a relationship again, it is based on something real, not on your expectation of a future inheritance. For years, I have been your bank. Now I need to see if I can be your mother again. Tears were streaming down his face now, silent, hot tears of regret. I'm so sorry, Mom, he sobbed. I'm so sorry. Sorry is a start, I said, standing up from the table. The town council meeting is on Tuesday. Your actions will tell me if that sorrow is genuine. I walked out of the coffee shop, leaving him there with the wreckage of his life. I did not look back. I had given him his choice, a difficult path toward redemption or the easy path of continuing to be a victim of his own poor choices. The rest was up to him. 2 months later, I sat in the front row of the newly dedicated Robert Gable reading room at the Oak Creek Public Library. The room was bright and cheerful, with colorful murals on the walls and low shelves packed with brand new children's books. The sale of the house had generated more than enough to fund the program for decades to come. Maria Santos, the head librarian and a dear friend, was at the podium. This incredible gift, she was saying, was made possible by the generosity and foresight of one of our own, a woman who understands that the greatest inheritance we can leave our children is a love of learning. Please join me in thanking Eleanor Gable. The room erupted in applause. I stood and smiled, my heart full. This was what a legacy was supposed to be. Not a house, not money, but something that would grow and enrich the community for years to come. My own life had found a new, peaceful rhythm. I loved my small apartment. It was mine, a space filled only with my own things, my own memories. The police had issued a warrant for Brenda's arrest. Detective Miller had called to tell me she had been picked up in Arizona after trying to use a fake ID to open a new line of credit. She was being extradited back to Ohio to face multiple felony charges. Justice, I had learned, was sometimes slow, but it was often thorough. Kevin had kept his word. His speech at the town council meeting had been excruciating, humiliating, and utterly honest. He had spared no one, least of all himself. It was the first brave thing I had seen him do in his entire adult life. He had started the slow, arduous process of rebuilding. He was working 2 jobs now, one at a hardware store and another waiting tables at night. Every 2 weeks, a check arrived in my mailbox, a small payment toward the massive debt he owed me. He had also started seeing a therapist. We weren't fixed. Our relationship wasn't healed, but it was, for the first time, honest. My phone buzzed with a text message. It was from him. "Mom, I know you're busy at the library dedication. Just wanted to say I'm proud of you. What you did with the house, it was the right thing to do. Dad would have loved it." I smiled and typed back a simple response. "Thank you, Kevin." He would have. I looked around the room at the happy faces of the children, already pulling books from the shelves, their eyes wide with wonder. I had lost a house, but I had regained myself. I had lost the son I thought I had, but I was slowly getting to know a new man, one who was finally learning the meaning of responsibility and respect. It had been a painful journey, a trial by fire, but I had walked through it and come out the other side, not burned, but purified. I was no longer just an ATM, a servant, a silent enabler. I was Eleanor Gable, and I was finally free. If this story touched your heart, please give this video a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe to Grandma's Daily Story and click the notification bell. We have a brand new story for you every single day. What did you think of the choice I made? Let me know in the comments below. And if you'd like to listen to another story right now, just click on one of the videos you see on your screen. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be back tomorrow with another story just for you.